So nervous system. Every time you move a muscle, every time you think a thought, your nerve cells are hard at work. They are processing information, receiving signals, deciding what to do with them, and dispatching new messages to their neighbors. Some nerve cells communicate directly with muscle cells, sending them the signal to contract. Other nerve cells involved solely in the bureaucracy of information, spending their lives communicating only with other nerve cells. But unlike our human bureaucracies, this processing of information must be fast in order to keep up with the ever-changing demand of life. Okay? So why do animals need a nervous system? Okay? Alright. You've got to be able to respond to outside stimulus in some form or fashion. Okay? If you can't respond, and you can't respond quickly, then you're going to be eaten just like this poor little bunny. Okay, so it has to be fast, it has to be accurate, and it has to reset quickly. Okay, so let's talk about a neuron. A neuron is what is a nerve cell. Okay, signal direction occurs only in one way on a nerve cell. Okay, comes in one side, goes out the other, one-way flow. Okay, so you have the cell body, and then you have the dendrites. The dendrites are the little small extensions where a signal is going to come in. Then it's going to go out through the axon. Okay, the axon, part of the axon is covered with a myelin sheath, which allows for the signal to travel faster. Okay, then it's going to get to a synaptic terminal, which allows it to jump to another dendrite of another nerve cell. Okay, the space between the axon of one cell and the dendrites of the next is called the synapse. Okay, the structure fits function. You have many entry points for signal, one path out. So it's going to transmit the signal. Alright, most specialized neurons are the most specialized cells in animals. It is the longest cell. In some animals, the blue whale neuron is 10 to 30 meters long. A giraffe axon can be up to 5 meters. A human neuron is about 1 to 2 meters. It can be 1 to 2 meters in length. Think dominoes. Okay, you've got to start the signal. This is how it's called a cascade system. Okay, it's going to start the signal, it's going to activate the next one, which activates the next one, which activates the next one. Okay, you knock down live dominoes by tipping the first one, that's to trigger the signal. You propagate the signal. Do the dominoes move down the line? No, just a wave through them. Okay, you reset the system. Before you can do it again, you have to set up the dominoes all over again. So you have to reset the axon. Alright, the neuron has a similar system. Protein channels are set up. Once the first one is open, the rest open in succession. It's an all or nothing response. A wave action travels down along the neuron. You have to reset channels so the neuron can react again. Cells live in a sea of charged ions. Anions are negative. They are more concentrated within the cell. Chlorine is from a charged amino acids. Cations are positive. They're more concentrated in the extracellular fluid, which means they are outside this cell. And the most common is sodium. Okay, we have channels in the membranes that leak potassium. Okay, so opposite charges are on opposite sides of the cells of the membrane. So the membrane is polarized. Negative inside, positive outside. This is a charge gradient. This is an imbalance condition. The positively charged ions repel each other, as do the negatively charged ions. They want to flow down their electric gradient and mix together evenly. This means that there is energy stored here, like a dammed up river. Voltage is a measurement of stored electrical energy. Okay? So it's stored energy like a battery. Alright, voltage. Voltage means the difference in the concentration of charges. The positives are the hole you leave behind when you move an electron. Okay? Stimulus. A nerve is stimulated. It reaches what's called the threshold potential. Threshold potential is what's going to open up the sodium channels for the sodium ions to begin to flow in. Okay? The charges reverse at this point on the neuron. So the positives are coming in, the negatives are going out. The cell becomes depolarized. So the first domino has fallen. The wave, the nerve impulse moves down the neuron. The change in charge opens the next sodium gate down the line. So these are called voltage gated channels because they are controlled by a change in volt. Okay, so here is a diagram showing that. the channel closed and the channel opened. Okay, sodium ions continue to diffuse into the cell. The wave moves down the neuron. This is your action potential. Okay, so the rest of the dominoes are falling. You have to reset. The second wave travels down. A second wave is going to travel down the neuron. It's going to open up the potassium channels. Potassium channels open up more slowly than sodium channels. Okay, potassium ions diffuse out of the cell. The charges reverse back at this point. So this is our reset. Negatives going back inside, positives going back outside. Okay. Opening gates in succession with the same strength, same speed, and same duration. Okay. You set the dominoes back up quickly. Combined wave travel down a neuron. Okay. Wave of opening ion channels moves down the neuron. Signal direction moves in only one direction. The flow of potassium out of the cell stops activation of sodium channels in the wrong direction. So it's going to keep this from going back the other direction. Okay, so now you are set for next time. The action potential propagates, which means the wave or the nerve impulse or action potential is occurring. It basically goes from the brain to the finger tips in milliseconds. Okay, so in the blink of an eye, ion channels open and close in response to changes in charge across the membrane. Sodium channels open quickly in response to depolarization and close slowly. Potassium channels open slowly in response to depolarization and close slowly. Sodium channels close when the nerve are closed when the nerve is not doing anything. Okay, structure and function. You want a quick response from the sodiums, and you want to slowly bring your nerve back to normal with the potassium channels. After firing, a neuron has to reset itself, so sodium needs to move back out, potassium needs to move back in. Both are moving against their concentration gradient, so we have to have a pump. Okay? We have to use energy. So we have the sodium potassium pump. It's an active transport protein in the membrane. It requires ATP because it is active. 3 sodiums are pumped out, 2 potassiums are pumped in. Resets the charge across the membrane. That's a lot of ATP, so you need lots of sugar. Remember that ATP is coming from cellular respiration. Dominoes are set back up again. Sodium potassium pumps are one of the main drains on the APD production of your body. Your brain is a very expensive organ to run. Alright, so the neuron is ready to fire again, so it's back at its resting potential. Okay, action potential graph, resting potential. Then the stimulus reaches a threshold potential, and that's when it activates. Then you get depolarization, which is the sodium channels open and the potassium channels closing. Sodium channels close and the potassium channels reopen, and the repolarization, which is the reset of the gradient. Right, then you can undershoot, which is the potassium channels close slowly. Alright, the myelin sheath. The axon is coated with Schwann cells. This insulates the axon. It speeds up the signal. Okay, the signal hops basically from node to node. Okay, so it's going to, any place there is myelin sheath, it can't travel through there, so it hops from one place to the next. Okay, you get saltatory conduction. So here it is, hopping from one node to the next. Okay, you get 150 meters per second versus about 5 meters per second. If you want to look at that in American terms, we're going from 330 miles per hour to about 11 miles per hour if it had to travel down the entire axon. Okay. So in multiple sclerosis, what happens is the immune system, the T cells, attack the myelin sheath and begin to break it down. So you get a loss of signal. Okay, what happens at the end of axon? Okay, you have to jump the gap. So the impulse has to jump the synapses. It's a junction between neurons. It has to jump quickly from one cell to another. So events at the synapses, action potential depolarizes the membrane. It opens up calcium channels. The neurotransmitter vesicles fuse with the membrane. They release the neurotransmitter to a synapse through diffusion. Neurotransmitter binds with the protein receptor. Okay? These are ion-gated channels, which means they are going to be activated by ions. we switch from an electrical signal to a chemical signal. We are a chemical signal at this point. Okay, the neurotransmitter is either degraded or reabsorbed, depending on what it is. All right, nerve impulses in the next neuron. So the postsynaptic neuron, this is the next one down the line, that triggers the nerve impulse in the next nerve cell. The chemical signals open up the ion gates. Okay. Then sodium diffuses into the cell, potassium diffuses out, switch back to voltage gated channel. And we're going down the second neuron. Neurotransmitters, acetylcholine. This is to transmit signals to skeletal muscles. Epinephrine and norepinephrine is our fight or flight response. Dopamine is widespread in the brain, affects sleep, mood, attention, and learning. Lack of dopamine in the brain is associated with Parkinson's disease. Excessive dopamine is linked to schizophrenia. Serotonin is widespread in the brain. It affects sleep, mood, and learning. Okay. Nerves communicate with one another and with muscle cells by using neurotransmitters. These are small molecules that are released from the nerve cell and rapidly diffuse to neighboring cells, stimulating a response once they arrive. Many different neurotransmitters are used for different jobs. Glutamate excites nerves into action. GABA inhibits the passing of information. Dopamine and serotonin are involved in subtle messages of thought and cognition. The main job of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine is to carry the signal from the nerve cells to muscle cells. When a motor nerve cell gets the proper signal from the nervous system, it releases acetylcholine into the synapses with muscle cells. The acetylcholine opens receptors on the muscle cells, triggering the process of contraction. Of course, once the message is passed, the neurotransmitter must be destroyed. Otherwise, later signals will get mixed up and jumbled. Okay? The cleanup of acetylcholine is the job of an enzyme. All right, neurotransmitters are the weak point of the nervous system. Any substance that affects neurotransmitters or mimics their effects are going to affect nerve function. Nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, mood-altering drugs such as stimulants, phenymethylanes, caffeine, nicotine, depressants such as barbiturates, hallucinogenic drugs like LSD, okay? Prescription drugs such as Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, poisons, okay? You'll remember when we looked at the mouse party thing, we saw how this happened. All right, acetylcholinesterase. This is the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine neurotransmitter, okay? Acetylcholinesterase inhibitors are called neurotoxins, okay? Since acetylcholinase has an essential function, it is a potential weak point in the nervous system. Poisons and toxins that attack the enzyme can cause the acetylcholine to accumulate in the nerve synapses, paralyzing the muscles. Over the years, acetylcholinesterase has been attacked in many ways by natural enemies. For instance, some snake toxins affect acetylcholinesterase. Acetylcholinesterase is found in the synapses between nerve cells and muscle cells. It waits patiently and springs into action soon after a signal is passed, breaking down the acetylcholine into its two component parts, acetic acid and choline. This effectively stops the signal, allowing the pieces to be recycled and rebuilt for the new neurotransmitter for the next message. Acetylcholinesterase has one of the fastest reaction rates of any of our enzymes, breaking up each molecule in about 80 microseconds. Okay? So, snake venom, sarin, and insecticides are going to interact with acetylcholinesterase and cause it to block. Okay? You will notice here, it is actually blocking the active site, so it is a competitive inhibitor. Okay? Alright, questions to ponder. Why are axons so long? Okay? They transmit the signal quickly. The synapses is the choke point. Reduce the number of synapses and reduce the time for transmission. Why have synapses at all? Decision points, interactions of multiple neurons, and control points. How do mind-altering drugs work? Okay? After neurotransmitters release, uptake, and breakdown, react with or block receptors and also serve as neurotransmitter mimics. Okay? Do plants have or need nervous systems? They react to stimuli, but is that a nervous system? It depends on how you define a nervous system. If you can't move quickly, there's really very little advantage of a nervous system running at the speed of electrical transmissions. Okay, so that wraps up the nervous system. So that is all parts of 6-6 for this unit.